or tomorrow. But we move on now to the Middle East, and according to the Gazan Health Ministry, at least 103 people have been killed in a wave of Israeli airstrikes since midnight. The toll includes women, children and a local journalist, along with 11 members of his family. Most of the casualties were reported in Khan Younis, Deir al-Balah and Jabalia, where homes and makeshift shelters were hit. Let's listen in to some of the people living there.
هذه همجية للاحتلال وهذا إشي إحنا مش قادرين نتحمله وإحنا بنقول يا رب تخلص الحرب وإحنا بنناشد كل المؤسسات الدولية تخلص الحرب هذه على خير لأنه بكفي.
وصفوا بيت جيراننا، كل بيت جيراننا أجى على بيتنا، كل بيتي اتدمر الحمد لله. أنا كنت نايمة هنا على السرير هذا، كل الأشياء هذه وكل الدنيا انقلبت هيك.
Well, the renewed violence comes as US President Donald Trump continues his tour of the Gulf, sparking outrage among Palestinians who accuse him of emboldening Israeli aggression. During his visit to Qatar, Trump proposed turning Gaza into a so-called freedom zone under US oversight. Let's listen in to the president.
Well, we're working very hard on Gaza, and Gaza has been a territory of death and destruction. The United States get involved and make it just a freedom zone, have a real freedom zone.
Meanwhile, a controversial US-backed humanitarian plan is set to launch by the end of May, managed by American contractors and criticised by the UN for bypassing neutral aid channels. With no aid deliveries since March the 2nd and over 500,000 Gazans at risk of starvation, according to some groups, pressure is mounting. Israel has agreed to expand aid distribution points but refuses to resume deliveries until all Hamas-held hostages are released. On the other hand, Hamas has just released an Israeli-American hostage, but more than 50 still remain in Gaza. Well, joining us to discuss these ongoing developments in the war between Israel and Hamas is Peter Baum, a foreign editor with the Weekly Blitz, who is joining us from Israel. Peter, let's first look at, of course, what we mentioned just a few moments ago, the situation surrounding aid and also the situation, of course, with hostages. Is it as simple as there is an impasse here and the aid won't come in through Israeli channels until those hostages are all released?
Thanks for having me. I don't think it is as simple as that. I hope that your listeners and viewers will be aware that aid is getting in through different channels, but what Israel is trying to avoid, and so far successfully, is two things. Firstly, that none of the aid can reach any Hamas operatives, for want of a better phrase, and more importantly, that the previous channels from which aid was given, mainly through UNRWA, is to be isolated. Israel does not trust UNRWA, and with good reason, and therefore they are working with the Americans to ensure that any future aid that does get in, and this will happen, as you quite rightly pointed out, via American contractors, will in future only be done through that channel. And the idea, the objective here is to completely dilute UNRWA's previous responsibilities in the area, and also to ensure that Hamas are not getting possession of the aid for which they use for their own purposes, obviously.
Yes, and of course we know, Peter, that military exercises from the IDF, have continued after the breakdown in the ceasefire talks following phase 1 of the plan that was agreed at the start of the calendar year. Continued strikes reported by the Hamas-run Health Ministry. They're reporting over 100 deaths since midnight. How do you think this situation can go moving forward, given the fact that the reason the military action has continued is because of the lack of hostages? But at what cost is that coming to the people living in Gaza?
Yeah, you make some very good points there, Josh, and a couple of things that need challenging. First of all, the numbers of casualties and reported deaths that emanate from the Hamas health ministry, and no one, to my knowledge, Josh, has ever been interviewed by the Hamas health ministry, must be taken, I wouldn't say with a pinch of salt, but must be really looked at carefully. The deaths that have been reported are clearly over-exaggerated to continue the demonising of Israel in the Western media. However, that's not to say that when Israel does make a targeted strike, as it does very frequently with the senior members of Hamas and senior terrorists, then there is clearly collateral damage, because those Hamas targets are hiding within civilian populations. So it is tragic. Every death is tragic, but Israel has taken the approach that the only way going forward that the people of Gaza will have their freedom will be free of the noose around their necks from Hamas. And I'm afraid to say that I think we will continue to see targeted strikes which will result in collateral damage, and Israel has decided that despite the saturation, media, demonization of her as a nation in Western media, she will continue with that objective. The only thing that will possibly stop this is if the opposition to Netanyahu, which I have to say is growing and becoming louder, gets to a level where Israeli society, currently divided, sways in favour of the anti-Netanyahu policies.
Yes, Peter, to bring an end to our discussion, I do want to quickly touch on Donald Trump, who has said that Gaza should be taken over by the United States and turned into a freedom zone. What exactly do you think that means, and how could that realistically be implemented?
Yeah, this again is very interesting. You've seen Mr. Trump's recent visit, current visit to the Gulf states, in which economically he has done for the American economy, if all these contracts come to fruition, quite an astounding job. Gaza, I think, is just another part of his economic plan, where he wants the US to be the prime mover in reconstructing the Gazan economy to make it. I know people laughed at him when he first came out with this some months ago. Do you remember that he said the Mediterranean of the Middle East?
Yes.
I think it's in Mr. Trump's mind that America, economically, with the backing of the Gulf states, and they seem to be backing him, will possibly achieve that objective. The interesting thing here, in my opinion, is how Iran seems to have been isolated, but how Qatar has really come into the fold politically and is now the real shaker and mover amongst the pro-Palestinian policymakers. And I think with the rapport that Mr. Trump seemed to have with the Qatari government, he just may well achieve that objective, provided Hamas can be defeated militarily.
Peter Baum, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. Of course, the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the hostage situation is something we will continue to cover here on NewsX World. But we move on now, and US President Donald Trump